Have you ever picked up a call that shattered your entire world in seconds? That's exactly what happened to Vera Carter on a crisp Chicago afternoon. As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across her sleek downtown law office. Vera, a sharp corporate attorney with her chestnut hair neatly tied back, and a gaze that could cut through any negotiation, was wrapping up a final client meeting. Her desk, a polished mahogany expanse, held neatly stacked files, testaments to her meticulous control over her career and life. But when her phone buzzed, the screen flashing an unfamiliar number from Horizon First Bank, her steady world tilted. She frowned, hesitating. Unknown calls weren't unusual, but something about the bank's name prickled her instincts. "Hello, this is Vera Carter," she answered, her voice calm but curious. On the other end, a man's voice, polished, professional, yet tinged with urgency, introduced himself as Brad Coleman from the bank. "I need to verify some information regarding a mortgage loan for a property at 720 Glenwood Drive," he said. Vera's pen froze mid-note. Glenwood Drive? She didn't own property there. Had never even heard of it. "You must have the wrong person," she replied, polite but firm, her mind already racing to dismiss the mix-up. "I don't have any loans tied to that address." Brad's tone softened, almost apologetic, but his words hit like a freight train. "I understand your surprise, Ms. Carter, but your name is listed as a co-signer on the mortgage application. The primary applicant is Madison Carter, your sister." The room seemed to shrink. Vera's breath caught, her fingers tightening around the phone. Madison, her younger sister, always a little reckless but never this. "That's impossible," she snapped, her voice betraying a crack of disbelief. "I've never signed anything for her loans." Brad hesitated, then delivered the final blow. "The loan was approved 7 months ago. All documents carry your signature, brought to the branch by your parents themselves." Vera's pen slipped, clattering onto the desk. Her parents? The people who taught her to dot every I and cross every T? Images flashed her mother's fleeting glances at Christmas, her father's stiff smile when she'd asked about Madison's new house. A sickening realization coiled in her gut. This wasn't a mistake. It was something deliberate, something personal. Her family, her own blood, had tied her name to a debt she didn't owe. As Brad promised to email the documents, Vera's mind churned, her orderly life unraveling with each passing second. The call ended, but the silence screamed louder. Vera stared at her phone, the weight of betrayal sinking in. She needed answers, and she needed them now. Little did she know that single call was just the first thread in a tangled web of deception, one that would pull her deeper into her family's secrets than she could ever imagine. The sting of betrayal cuts deepest when it comes from those you love most. Vera Carter sat motionless at her desk, the echo of Brad Coleman's voice from Horizon First Bank still clawing at her mind. Her office, once a sanctuary of order with its sleek Chicago skyline view, now felt like a cage. The phone call had shattered her reality. Her name, her identity, tethered to a mortgage she'd never touched, co-signed for her sister Madison. But the real gut punch? Her parents, her own flesh and blood, had delivered the papers to the bank. The people who'd raised her to cherish honesty had plunged a knife into her trust. Vera's heart pounded, a furious drumbeat of disbelief and dread. 7 months ago, Brad had said, the loan was approved, her signature scrawled across documents she'd never seen. 7 months of lies. Her mind spiraled, dragging up memories that now burned with new meaning. Christmas dinner, her mother's gaze darting away when Vera asked about Madison's new house on Glenwood Drive. The awkward hush at her father's birthday party when they'd handed her health insurance forms to sign, claiming it was routine. Just for renewal, her mother had cooed, her smile too tight. Vera had signed, trusting blindly, never imagining those papers might be a trap. Now each recollection felt like a fresh wound. Her parents' evasions, Madison's vague excuses about her fresh start, they weren't quirks, they were calculated. Vera's chest tightened, rage simmering beneath her shock. How could they? She'd built her life on integrity, clawing her way to a corner office at Rothman and Lindley, only for her family to gamble her reputation like it was pocket change. The thought of her name, her hard-earned identity, being used as a pawn made her stomach churn with violation. She grabbed her phone, fingers trembling, and dialed Brad back. "I need those documents," she demanded, her voice raw with urgency. "Every page, every signature." Brad promised to send them within minutes, But his next words twisted the knife deeper. "The loan's 2 months overdue, Miss Carter. The balance is $17,800. $17,000. A debt she didn't create, now staining her name. Her law license, her career, everything she'd bled for teetered on the edge of this deception." Vera's mind raced, torn between fury and a desperate need for clarity. She thought of her sister, Madison, always the dreamer, always needing a bailout. Had she orchestrated this? Or were her parents the masterminds, using Vera's success as a shield for their schemes? The betrayal felt like a living thing, wrapping around her heart, squeezing until she could barely breathe. She needed someone she could trust, someone who wouldn't flinch at the ugliness of it all. Betrayal burns hottest when it's inked in your own name. Vera Carter's world was crumbling, each revelation a fresh wound tearing at her soul. The call from Horizon First Bank had already shattered her trust, exposing a mortgage she'd never signed for, tied to her sister Madison and delivered by her parents' hands. Now, as she sat in her Chicago law office, the sterile glow of her computer screen felt like a spotlight on her unraveling life. Her heart thundered with a toxic blend of fury and dread. She needed someone to anchor her before she drowned in the chaos. That someone was Alex, her college confidant and a civil attorney whose steady presence could tame even her wildest storms. When Vera dialed his number, her voice broke, raw and jagged. "They forged my signature," she blurted, the words tasting like venom. "Madison, my parents, they've dragged me into their lies." Alex didn't hesitate, didn't question her sanity. "I'm there in 15, he said, his calm slicing through her panic like a lifeline. True to his word, he arrived, his familiar frame filling the doorway, eyes sharp with purpose. Vera barely registered his greeting as the email from Brad at the bank pinged, its attachments a ticking bomb of truth. Together they opened the PDF and Vera's breath caught, her chest tightening with a sickening mix of rage and disbelief. There it was, the mortgage declaration. Her name scrawled across the signature line in a cruel mockery of her own hand. But it wasn't just any forgery. The little loop at the end of the A, in Vera screamed familiarity. It was her mother's handwriting, unmistakable and deliberate. "They didn't even try to hide it," Alex muttered, his finger tapping the screen, his voice laced with disgust. The betrayal wasn't just personal. It was brazen, a slap across Vera's entire existence. Her hands shook, the room spinning as anger surged, molten and unstoppable. Her mother, the woman who'd braided her hair and preached honesty, had weaponized her identity. Her father, her sister, they'd all conspired, turning her success into their playground. Vera's career, her law license, her painstakingly built reputation all dangled over a cliff because of their greed. "This is fraud," Alex said, his words grounding her just enough to keep her from screaming. "It's a serious crime." She nodded, her jaw clenched so tight it ached, her resolve hardening like steel. Then her phone lit up, her mother calling, oblivious or defiant. Vera's pulse spiked, a fresh wave of fury crashing over her. Alex gestured, his eyes steady. "Answer it. Stay calm." She inhaled, her finger hovering over the button, knowing this call would change everything. Nothing scars like the moment you realize your family sees you as a pawn. Vera Carter's heart pounded with a volatile mix of rage and heartbreak as she stood outside her parents' suburban Chicago home, the same house where she'd once felt safe. The evening air was heavy, thick with the weight of betrayal. Her mother's phone call hours earlier, cheerful, deceitful, offering spaghetti and meatballs, had ignited a fire in Vera's gut. They'd forged her signature, saddled her with a $17,800 debt for Madison's house, and dared to call it love. Now, clutching a folder of damning bank documents, Vera was done playing the dutiful daughter. Tonight, she'd face the wolves in her family's clothing. She pushed open the door, the familiar creak of the hinges twisting her insides with nostalgia and nausea. Her mother sat on the couch, her smile brittle as glass. Her father hovered near the kitchen, eyes averted, while Madison slouched at the dining table, her face a mask of feigned innocence. The sight of them, her blood, her betrayers, sent a surge of fury through Vera's veins. "Let's cut the act," she said, her voice sharp enough to slice through their pretense. She slammed the folder onto the table, papers spilling like accusations. "Explain why my name is on a mortgage I never signed." Her mother's face faltered, a flicker of panic betraying her composure. "Sweetheart, it's not what you think," she stammered, but Vera's glare silenced her. Madison's eyes welled up, her voice a pathetic whimper. I needed help, Vera. Just for the house. Help? The word felt like a slap. You call forging my signature help? Vera snapped, her voice trembling with righteous anger. You put my career, my law license, my entire life at risk. Her father finally spoke, his tone gruff, defensive. You're doing fine, Vera. Madison needed a chance. The audacity of it, dismissing her sacrifice as if it were pocket change, made her blood boil. Vera's hand shook as she flipped open the documents, pointing to the forged signature, her mother's telltale loop glaring back. This could cost me everything, she said, her voice raw with hurt. And you didn't even blink. Her mother stood, reaching out, but Vera recoiled. We're family, her mother pleaded, the word sounding hollow, tainted. Family doesn't lie, steal, or destroy. Vera shot back, her chest tight with the ache of shattered trust. Madison sobbed, promising to pay it back, but Vera's laugh was bitter, cold. With what? You can't even hold a job. She demanded Madison be there for answers, her resolve unyielding. We're talking tonight, she said, her voice steel. No more excuses. The deepest wounds come when you realize your life was just collateral for someone else's greed. Vera Carter sat in her Chicago law office, the dim glow of Alex's laptop casting harsh shadows across her face. Her heart pounded with a sickening cocktail of betrayal and dread, each beat a reminder of her family's treachery. The forged mortgage was just the beginning, a $17,800 stab in the back. But as Alex, her best friend and a civil attorney with a knack for uncovering ugly truths, dug deeper, Vera braced for a devastation she could barely fathom. The air felt thick, suffocating, as if the walls themselves were closing in on her shattered trust. Alex arrived at 8 p.m., his face grim, carrying sandwiches and a bag heavy with evidence. Eat, he urged, but Vera's stomach churned with nausea. She couldn't swallow food when her entire world was being gutted. He opened his laptop, and the screen lit up with a nightmare. 3 credit cards in her name, maxed out at $70,000. A $50,000 personal loan from some shady Iowa finance company. Worst of all, an investment account faked in her name used as collateral for a business loan she'd never heard of. Total damage? Alex said, his voice low, heavy with regret. Around $292,000. Vera's breath hitched, her vision blurring as rage and despair collided. Nearly $300,000 stolen not by strangers, but by her own blood. Her mind reeled, each revelation a fresh lash across her soul. Her parents, her sister Madison, they'd plundered her identity for 7 months, weaving a web of lies while she worked, smiled, lived, oblivious. Her credit score, once a pristine 812, had plummeted to 613, a silent assassination of her financial life. My career, she whispered, her voice cracking with panic. If the firm finds out, I'm done. Alex's eyes met hers, steady but fierce. We'll fight this. But it's bigger than the mortgage. He flipped to another screen. Unauthorized logins from her mother's IP, timed right after Madison's visit to Vera's office. They hadn't just betrayed her, they'd planned it, cold and calculated, like thieves casing a vault. Vera paced, her fury a living thing, clawing at her insides. Her family had turned her into a puppet, her name a tool for their reckless schemes. How much more don't I know? She demanded, her voice raw, trembling. Alex shook his head, his silence more terrifying than words. If they forged a mortgage, what's stopping them from fake investments? Tax filings. Her phone buzzed, Madison's name flashing, but Vera ignored it, her resolve hardening into something razor-sharp. She wasn't just a victim. She was a lawyer, and she'd fight like one. Truth can be a blade, slicing through the lies you once called love. Vera Carter's Chicago office felt like a war room, the air thick with the stench of betrayal. Her family's deception, forging her signature on a mortgage, burying her under $292,000 of fraudulent debt, had already gutted her trust. Now, as she stood beside Alex, her best friend and legal ally, her heart thundered with a volatile mix of fury and violation. Every tick of the clock amplified her dread, but also her resolve. The sterile glow of Alex's laptop screen wasn't just illuminating data, it was exposing the calculated cruelty of those she'd once held dearest. Alex's fingers flew across the keyboard, his jaw tight with focus. "We're not just fighting a mortgage," he said, his voice low, laced with urgency. "They've been inside your accounts." He pulled up her remote login history and Vera's breath caught, a sharp stab of horror piercing her chest. There it was. An unauthorized login from her mother's home IP, time-stamped hours after Madison's visit to Vera's office on her birthday. The memory of Madison lingering at her desk, borrowing her laptop to check email, now burned like acid. It wasn't innocent, it was reconnaissance, a deliberate breach of her life. Vera's hands trembled, rage surging like wildfire. "They didn't just steal my name," she whispered, her voice raw, cracking with disbelief. "They invaded me." Her mother, with her soft smiles and Sunday roasts, had turned predator. Madison, her little sister, hadn't just followed orders, she'd scouted the terrain. The betrayal wasn't a single act. It was a heist meticulously planned, with Vera's identity as the prize. Her office, her sanctuary, felt desecrated. Her privacy raped by the people who'd taught her what family meant. Alex leaned back, his eyes fierce but steady. "This is digital evidence, undeniable. We've got them." But Vera's mind was a storm, flashing with every moment she trusted them, every hug, every shared laugh now tainted by their greed. Her career, her law license, her painstakingly built reputation all teetered on the edge of their lies. "What else did they touch?" she demanded, her voice a snarl of pain and defiance. Alex's silence was answer enough. The rabbit hole went deeper, and they hadn't hit bottom. She sank into her chair, her fury hardening into something cold, unyielding. "We freeze my credit tonight," she said, her words clipped, resolute. "File fraud reports with every bank, every card." Alex nodded, pulling out a legal pad, but Vera's mind was already racing ahead. She wasn't just fighting for her name, she was arming herself for war. Her family thought they could hide behind love. She'd show them what justice looked like. Facing your betrayers is like staring into a mirror that reflects your deepest wounds. Vera Carter stood at the threshold of her parents' Chicago suburban home, her heart a battlefield of rage and sorrow. The familiar porch light flickered, casting a sickly glow over the facade of her childhood, now a house of lies. Armed with a thick stack of documents, proof of her family's $292,000 betrayal, she felt less like a daughter and more like a warrior, ready to slay the myth of family they'd weaponized against her. Her mother, father, and sister Madison had forged her signature, stolen her identity, and gambled her career, all while smiling through their deceit. Tonight there'd be no more hiding. Vera stormed inside, the door slamming shut with a thud that echoed her fury. The living room, once warm with memories, felt suffocating, tainted by their treachery. Her mother rose from the couch, her smile a fragile mask of denial. "Vera, you're here," she chirped, but Vera's glare cut through the pretense like a blade. Her father stood rigid by the stove, avoiding her eyes, while Madison slumped at the table, her face a portrait of guilt and defiance. "No games," Vera snapped, her voice raw with righteous anger. She slapped the documents onto the table, papers spilling like shrapnel, credit card statements, fake loans, her stolen signature glaring back. "Explain this." Her mother's hands trembled, flipping through the evidence, her facade crumbling into panic. "It was for Madison," she stammered, but the excuse ignited Vera's rage. "For Madison?" she roared, her chest tight with betrayal's sting. "You forged my name, buried me in debt, and risked my law license. You call that love?" Madison's tears fell, her voice a weak plea. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she sobbed, but Vera's laugh was bitter, venomous. "You spent $9,000 at a spa while I was drowning in your lies." Her father's scowl deepened, his words dripping with entitlement. "You've got everything, Vera. We just gave her a chance." The audacity seared her soul. They plundered her life and dared to call it fairness. Vera's hands shook, not with fear but with a blazing resolve. "I'm done being your scapegoat," she said, her voice steady, lethal. "Tomorrow, I'm filing an identity fraud complaint with the state." Her mother gasped, clutching the table. "You destroy us?" she cried, but Vera locked eyes with her, unflinching. "You destroyed yourselves when you chose to exploit me." Madison reached for her, desperate, but Vera stepped back, her heart hardened against their crocodile tears. This wasn't family, it was a crime scene, and she was the survivor. When your name becomes a weapon, the betrayal cuts deeper than any blade. Vera Carter sat in Solstice James's office, her heart a cauldron of shock and fury, each new revelation scalding her soul. The senior financial advisor's sterile workspace, with its stark white walls and humming computer, felt like a courtroom where Vera's life was on trial. Her family's treachery forging her signature, drowning her in $292,000 of debt was horrific enough. But Solstice's grim expression promised a darker abyss, one that would shred the last threads of Vera's trust in those she'd once called kin. Solstice's voice was steady, but her words landed like blows. "Vera, this isn't just about you anymore," she said, turning her screen to reveal a spreadsheet that made Vera's blood run cold. Her name, her pristine reputation, had been hijacked to create the Riverpine Growth Fund, a phantom investment scheme that had siphoned $5.2 million from unsuspecting victims. The numbers danced before her eyes, each digit a scream of violation. Her parents and Madison hadn't just stolen her identity, they'd weaponized her success, her law degree, her flawless credit to lure their prey friends, neighbors, even Mrs. Helen Ward, Vera's beloved high school teacher. Vera's breath hitched, rage and grief colliding in a storm of anguish. "They used me to scam people," she whispered, her voice raw, trembling with the weight of their cruelty. Solstice nodded, pulling up fake emails crafted from an address mimicking Vera's .carter.conult@gmail.com, complete with her electronic signature. They'd even replicated her investment portfolio, parading her name to dupe retirees and old friends of her parents, like Mrs. Ward, who'd trusted Vera's fund with her life savings. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was monstrous, a calculated rape of her identity to rob the vulnerable. Her hands clenched, nails biting into her palms as fury surged, white-hot and relentless. "How could they?" she choked out, picturing her mother's forced smiles, her father's dismissive shrugs, Madison's crocodile tears. They'd turned her into a puppet, her name a glittering lure for their con. Solstice's next words were a gut punch. "There's a keylogger on your office computer, likely planted by Madison." Vera's stomach lurched. Her sister hadn't just betrayed her. She'd invaded her sanctuary, mining her life for profit. Alex burst in, his face taut with urgency. "Your dad tried to pull $200,000 from a joint account today. It's frozen. But they're panicking." Vera's resolve hardened, her pain forging itself into steel. "We stop them now," she said, her voice low, lethal. She'd fight not just for herself, but for every soul her family had crushed. Justice tastes bittersweet when it demands the ruin of those you once loved. Vera Carter sat in the packed Chicago courtroom, her heart a furnace of resolve and anguish, each beat echoing the betrayal that had brought her here. Federal courtroom floor buzzed with tension, the air thick with the weight of shattered trust. Across the aisle, her family, her father Gordon, mother Helen, and sister Madison sat like ghosts of her past. Gordon's gray suit hung loose, his face etched with defeat. Helen's pleading glances stung like salt in a wound. Madison, pale and hollow-eyed, avoided Vera's gaze entirely. They'd forged her identity, stolen $5.2 million through a fake investment fund, and left a trail of broken lives, yet Vera felt no triumph, only a raw, aching necessity to end their reign of deceit. As Judge Roberts called the trial to order, Vera's hands gripped her statement folder, her pulse hammering with dread and defiance. The defense spun tales of family pressure and hardship, but Prosecutor Whitaker's voice cut through their lies like a blade. "This was no mistake," he declared, his words igniting Vera's fury anew. The defendants weaponized Vera Carter's identity to defraud vulnerable victims. When Vera took the stand, her legs trembled, but the sight of Mrs. Helen Ward, her old teacher, now a victim, steadied her. "I'm Vera Carter," she began, her voice cracking with pain but rising with strength. "My family turned my name into a shield for their crimes." She laid bare every wound. The forged emails, the $292,000 in fake debts, the IP traces tying her parents' home to the fraud. "I wasn't just betrayed," she said, locking eyes with Madison, her voice thick with hurt. "I was erased." The prosecution piled on evidence, bank statements, victim testimonies, even damning social media photos of her mother in designer dresses, her father golfing in Florida, all funded by stolen money. Gasps rippled through the courtroom as Mrs. Ward testified, her voice quivering. "I trusted Vera's name." Madison's claim of ignorance collapsed when Whitaker revealed she'd used Vera's resume complete with her law degree to bolster the scam. The judge's gavel fell and Vera's breath caught, her heart a tangled knot of justice and loss. Gordon Carter, 18 years, Roberts intoned. Helen Carter, 15 years. Madison Carter, 12 years. Madison's sobs echoed, Helen slumped, and Gordon stared ahead hollow. Their assets, houses, cars, jewelry were seized for restitution. But no amount could heal the scars they'd left. Mrs. Ward squeezed Vera's hand, whispering, "You did right." Yet Vera's chest ached with the cost of truth. Healing begins when you trade the chains of betrayal for the wings of truth. Vera Carter stood alone in a Chicago auditorium, the golden stage lights casting a warm glow over the empty chairs of the first Reclaim and Rise conference. Her heart, once a battlefield scarred by her family's treachery, $5.2 million stolen. Her identity hijacked, now pulsed with a fierce, radiant purpose. The trial had ended her parents Gordon and Helen, and sister Madison behind bars, their lies exposed in a blaze of justice. But for Vera, the real victory wasn't their punishment. It was this moment, where pain transformed into power, lighting a path for others to follow. Gone was the daughter who'd begged for love from those who'd exploited her. In her place stood a survivor, her soul forged in the crucible of betrayal. The board at Rothman and Lindley had seen it too, naming her director of Reclaim and Rise, a program to uplift victims of family fraud. Vera dove in, her nights sleepless but electric, building a hotline, a website, a lifeline for the broken. Over 300 souls reached out in weeks, mothers, retirees, students, all bleeding from wounds like hers. Each call, like Marlene's tearful confession of losing her retirement to her son, cracked Vera's heart open, not with despair but with resolve. "You're not stupid for trusting," she told them, her voice thick with empathy. "You're brave for rising." Cleaning her parents' seized apartment was a pilgrimage through pain. In Madison's drawer, a notebook scrawled with Riverpine plan, "Don't let Vera find out," nearly broke her. But instead of rage, she exhaled, releasing their hold. That night at the first support group, Vera scrapped her speech. Facing weathered faces, Lindsay's tears, others' quiet hope, she spoke raw truth. "I thought family was safe until they stole everything. But you're not alone." The room erupted in shared stories, a chorus of courage that drowned out her family's lies. Notes poured in gratitude, not for her, but for the mirror she held to their strength. One autumn afternoon, sipping coffee with Solstice, Vera faced the question of forgiveness. "It's not about them," she said, her voice steady, fierce with clarity. "I've forgiven myself for enduring their poison." Her new family, Alex, Solstice, the survivors, wasn't bound by blood, but by honesty, respect, love freely given. At the conference, her story ignited the crowd, their notes a tapestry of triumph. "You showed me strength is cutting out the toxic." Vera clutched one, her eyes misty but bright, knowing she'd turned betrayal into a beacon. Standing under the banner "Justice begins with truth," Vera felt whole. She'd lost a family but found herself, rewriting family as safety, trust, and compassion. Every victim she lifted, every story she honored, was a defiant middle finger to her past. This wasn't just closure, it was a roaring, soul-stirring rebirth, a promise that no one would walk her path alone again. And so Vera's journey ended not with a whimper, but with a blazing vow, to protect, to empower, to prove that from the ashes of betrayal, a life of purpose could rise, unstoppable and glorious.